To today's Reactor London session. Today's session is DevOps Tools of the Trade and will be delivered by Devendra Rawat. So Devendra has over 17 years of experience with lots of technologies, including Microsoft Technology Stack, Azure and AWS. So we're delighted to have Devendra with us today. This session will be 1.5 hours long. It will be recorded and that link will be available on our YouTube channel shortly. So I will post that within the meetup group and I'll also post the YouTube channel in this chat too, so you can keep an eye on it there. So without going any further, I will hand over to our speaker for today if you'd like to take over.
Thank you, Emma. Hello all, good afternoon, good evening, depending on from wherever you're joining. So as Emma mentioned, today's session is about DevOps tools of the trade. So we'll be covering something about DevOps, we'll discuss about DevOps, what is DevOps, and after that, we'll move towards Azure Pipeline, which helps us with the DevOps, right? So with that, Emma already introduced me, but briefly about myself. I'm Devendra Singh Rawat, and as Emma mentioned, I have more than 17 years of experience with various technologies, primarily with Microsoft technologies, but I have exposure to AWS, Azure, and other open source technologies also, and I've played multiple roles of developer, architect, tech manager, test architect, right? And I feel lucky to get this opportunity of playing multiple roles because it helps me to give a broader vision, which is very important for DevOps, of course, right? So moving ahead. So this is the first link which I want to share with everyone. So this will be a server link which I'll be sharing in the end also. All right, so just feel free to share the feedback whenever you leave the session. After this session, you can always go back to YouTube Reactor channel, Microsoft Reactor channel, and see this session recording along with other session recordings which are getting uploaded there as we are conducting this session regularly. Okay, so agenda today. So today we are going to cover DevOps, as I mentioned. That's the primary thing which we are going to cover. Along with DevOps, we'll cover what is CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And after understanding the basics of CI/CD, we'll move towards second topic, which is CI with Azure Pipelines, how Azure Pipelines help us with the continuous integration. We'll see how to embed our automated test when we set up that continuous integration pipeline. Then after that, we'll move towards how continuous deployment can be achieved with Azure Pipelines. And along with that, definitely there are a few other things which we'll see how to set up our build status on our GitHub repo with the build status patch. And then I'll share some next steps to go through so that later on, whenever you want to go through this session, these labs, right, study material, so that I'll be sharing all those links. And yep. And in between, wherever you feel like you have any query, feel free to ping those questions. I'll keep on checking my Teams window, looking for the questions. I'll take small pauses in between. All right, and I'll try to answer as much as possible. So I just want to share this prerequisite slides first, just to give a brief, right? Because we are going to do a hands-on lab. And that hands-on lab will include GitHub, where we'll be putting our source code repository, right? So this is one prerequisite for this lab. We should have a basic understanding of GitHub, although it's not necessary to have that understanding, just understand that it's a source code repository. I hope most of us are aware of this now. Then we'll be using Azure account for deployment when we see how continuous deployment can be done with Azure Pipeline. So we'll need Azure account because I'll be deploying on app services of Azure. And we'll need an account with dev.azure.com, right? So if any one of you have already created account long time back, you might have account with xyz.visualstudio.com, which is still valid account, but that's same thing now, right? It's restructure, or there's a new URL now which is dev.azure.com, which can be used. So yep, and along with that, when doing labs, I'll be talking about what are the extensions which are required on the GitHub side, in your Visual Studio Code, wherever it comes into a discussion, to explain how those extensions are useful, where it needs to be installed. Right, Git install from definitely if you want to do a check-in check-out on your local machine, you need a Git install. You should have a Git install on your machine, but for this lab probably will not be doing much of check-in check-out through our machine. I might be more making changes directly on the GitHub portal. Right, and Visual Studio Code again, I'll not be using a lot. It's very beautiful tool. If you are not using it or you have not used it, right, it's a free tool by Microsoft, right? And it's not only about DevOps. You can do a lot and develop in a lot of different languages with this tool. So I'll be using this tool for this exercise just to show the code which we'll be deploying, some of the ARM templates, some of the YAML files. Right, so today we will not be using a lot, but yeah, if you want to understand, there are many sessions which are already conducted, and I think you can find one good session about Visual Studio Code, how to use it, on Microsoft Reactor channel of YouTube. So, okay. Right, so I'm just putting my streaming on pause, because there are some bandwidth issues, so, but feel free to put up any question. I'll keep on looking into it, right? So don't worry about it. So starting with what is DevOps, right? So first, I just want to share my understanding of DevOps, and feel free to pitch in and ask question or raise any point here, right? So that's in simple language, DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users, right? It's about delivering value to our end users, and it's not a designation. It's not a some methodology. It's mix of, as I mentioned here, it's union of people, process, and products, right? So how people work together, how people from dev team, ops team work together to deploy their latest changes on certain environment, how they set up a process within themselves so that they can become more efficient, and the tools which they will be using, the products which they will be using to enable continuous delivery of their application, their product, their projects, right? So that they can deliver the real value to end users as soon as possible. So that's about DevOps at high level, all right? So no rocket science, a simple definition, right? So, oops, I think I should. Okay. So as I mentioned, right? So the DevOps, right? So it's about practices which we follow, right? The team, the people, dev team, ops team, right? Or we call DevOps team, right? It's about the practices which we follow, and these are the practices which generally a DevOps team follow, right? So it's about agile planning and ensuring that we do a continuous integration whenever some developer, or for that matter, some DevOps team member or ops team member is making any change in the repository, right? So we need to make sure that we integrate, make sure that we are deploying that code on some location, or even if we are not deploying, we should be able to test that code as soon as that check-in is done, right? So that we know that is there anything wrong which is checked in, right? So it's about failing fast, right? We call it in the agile terminology, right? And at the end, it's about monitoring, right? Because without monitoring, you'll not understand how your system is behaving, right? So you need to monitor your system. You need to understand how system is behaving, and accordingly, you need to decide whether you need a separate new deployment immediately, or you want to roll back and all. So these are few practices at high level, which generally when we talk about DevOps, these are getting followed, right? And this all started when we started talking about agile methodology around probably 14, 15 years back, right? When teams started talking about agile, and then slowly they started talking about cloud, and then came the microservices. So all these things evolved together, right? And that's where we started realizing need of DevOps, right? Because there was a lot of automation, a lot of microservices which needs to be maintained, which needs to be monitored, small components, right, which needs to work together. And we want to be agile, right? At the same time, we want to deliver values, and that's where everyone felt that okay, we need a DevOps concept, I'll say, right? So where we can enable all these practices easily, right? So this is about practices that generally DevOps team follow, right? And what are the achievements of DevOps, right? So when we set up a DevOps team within an organization, within a project, or within a portfolio, right? So when we say that we are able to deliver frequently, right? We are able to deploy our code frequently so that our stakeholders, it could be end user, it could be internal stakeholders, right? They can look at it. It could be QA team, it could be our own team, right? So everyone can look at it and see that okay, whether the change which is made is working fine or not, right? Whether it is integrated properly or not, whether it is breaking something or not. So doing that thing frequently shows that okay, we have achieved one milestone in DevOps. That's what we can say, right? Second part we see is that okay, whether we have reduced the lead time from commit to deploy. What does this mean? So as I mentioned, right? So whenever we do a code commit in any source control, be it Git, be it TFS or SVN, right? So are we able to deploy it immediately? It's about capability of deploying. It's not necessary that we have to deploy it immediately. Many people think that when we talk about DevOps and when we talk about quick deployment, it has to be deployed immediately. Not necessary. As I mentioned, there is no fixed methodology. It's about how teams are adopting that process, right, as per their suitability, right? So, but if we are able to deploy a code, we have that capability of deploying a code as soon as we commit. That gives us quick learning ASAP as soon as possible. So with that capability, we feel that okay, that's another achievement of DevOps, right? That's where DevOps moves toward, and that's where DevOps helps us, right? Third thing is reduce change failure rate. Okay, so we all know that there is you might have heard of processes going on within an organization about left shift quality, right? So we all know that whenever something fails in production, right, it has a big cost involved in, right? It's a reputational cost apart from monetary cost and all, right? So we try to left shift the quality, which means that we try to break our system ASAP in the whole cycle so that we can fix it ASAP. And it's a well-known fact that if we find out some issue early in our cycle, probably in the development time itself, right? And that's where unit testing concept comes into picture, extreme programming and all, right? So if we do that, then we'll save a lot of cost, and it includes reputational cost also, right? And our customers will be happy, or I should say, rather say our stakeholders, everyone will be happy, right? So that's another achievement, right? So if we can reduce change failure rate in the production, right? It doesn't mean that we have to reduce it during development itself. There will always be bugs, there will always be issues, right? But it's about identifying them early and fixing them early. And that's about the last point, which talks about recovery from incidents more quickly, right? So whatever we do, there will be chances that we might face some issue in the production, right? So initially, when we set up our DevOps processes, when we start doing those things, even after setting up those things, it's not a silver bullet, right? So even after doing all those stuff, we might find a scenario where things will fail in production. Even for mature teams who are very mature in terms of DevOps processes, DevOps methodologies, right? The way they have incorporated DevOps into their organization, they might find a scenario where in production things might break. But it's more about how quickly we recover from that incident, right? How quickly we get that information through monitoring, and how quickly we are able to fix that, right? So if we are able to do that thing, we are good, right? And that's where we say that, yeah, we have achieved what we want to achieve through our DevOps process. Okay, I'll quickly check if there is any query. I think there is something published. Okay, no worries. Yeah, so no question right now. Okay, so moving ahead. So again, DevOps, as I mentioned, it's more about a concept, right? And it's more about as initially we said, right? It's the union of people, process, tools. Okay, so sometimes people get get a feeling that DevOps is something which is going to help us, right? And it is going to resolve all the issues which we are facing within our project, within our organization and all, which is not a case. And it's something similar to microservices, if you are aware of that, right? So it's not about that these things are silver bullets, right? So that's where we need to understand it's not a methodology, right? DevOps is not a method, it's a practice which is adopted by teams for faster quality delivery of values to their customers, right? And primarily it includes CI/CD, but as team mature, they find out more and more which they can optimize within their teams, all right, to deliver values with better quality. And that's where DevOps works, right? So they try to find out as per our agile process, right? With every iteration, with every sprint, every team try to evolve. They try to learn from their mistakes and they try to optimize themselves, right? So that's what is DevOps also, right? It's about setting up those practices within our team. So it's not a specific piece of software. So if we talk about DevOps, you might hear that okay, there are a lot of this product which helps with DevOps and all. It's not about that. It's about there will always be some tools which will be required for setting up some process. That tool could be a software tool. That tool could be a simple process, right? So it's not about a specific piece of software. It's about identifying the tools which can help us to achieve, as we saw in previous slide, right? To achieve faster deliveries, faster values, quality values to our customers. Okay. So it's not a quick fix for any organization's challenge. As I mentioned, it's not a silver bullet. So no one can guarantee that if we are following a process, it will definitely going to resolve it. So every team have to evolve with every step they take in this direction. They need to observe where they are facing issues. They need to find out solution for it, try to implement it. And if it works, they need to continue following that process. If it doesn't, they have to stop. They need to find out alternative path, right? So yeah. So it's not just a team or a job title, but yeah, I just want to take mention this thing with a pinch of salt, right? So there are many organizations or where you might have seen that there are a specific DevOps team, and many organizations understand it even after setting up that team, that how that team should work. Many organizations set up such teams with the title DevOps, right? But they don't know how to utilize that, right? So that's where we say that it's not about just a team or a job title, right? It's about understanding how processes are going to help us and who is going to work on those processes in the beginning, right? So I've seen organizations, I've worked with organizations where we had a DevOps team, which were something like ops team only, but just because of the wrong understanding of DevOps concept, they renamed their ops team, part of their ops team, as DevOps, and they started owning the whole ops system and all the way ops team used to own earlier, right? So there was less interaction between dev team, ops team, and less interaction in a sense what they want to improve on, right? So that defeats the purpose of DevOps. And I've seen organizations where they have DevOps team, where DevOps team interact with dev team, ops team separately, right? And they find out with every iteration, with every sprint, they try to find out ways to improve on, right? They work on some dedicatedly on some DevOps process which can help team, and then they hand it over to dev team or ops team as suitable, right? So that they can focus on some next step, and other teams can utilize those processes which are set up by DevOps team, right? So those are some efficiencies which everyone need to find out when they set up DevOps process within their organizations, right? But saying that okay, we have a DevOps team and we have started DevOps, it doesn't make sense. That will not help. Moving ahead, so that's about DevOps in general, right? So I shared my understanding what is DevOps, right? How organizations are adopting it and all, right? So now Azure has come up with DevOps, right? Where Azure found that there's a need of some common tooling common tools which can help DevOps process in general, right? And that's where there are this portal devazure.com, DevOpsAzure.com, where you can set up a organization, set up your project repositories, and within that there are few things like Azure board, where generally teams can basically these are agile tools that help us to plan, track, and discuss our work even with other teams, right? So here we manage our backlogs, and everyone gets visibility. It's more about agile boarding, right? Creating work items, epics, and then stories under those epics and all. So yeah, so that's one thing which starts when we talk about agile processes, right? Clean visibility, everyone understand what other teams are doing, right? Small chunks of stories and other stuff. With that, there is Azure Pipeline, which is something which helps us for continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? So whenever developers are doing their check-ins, their commits in their source code repositories, after that, how frequently we can integrate their changes, how frequently we can deploy it, right? So that's where Azure Pipeline helps us, right? So these will basically let us build, test, and deploy, right? And what is Azure Test Plan? Again, as we are talking about teams, so initially my focus was more on dev and ops, but of course, QA team is also part of engineering team, a part of development team, right? So they also need to plan for a test and integrate those tests with the stories which are there on Azure boards, right? And they need to run those tests when some continuous integration happens through via Azure Pipelines, right? So this is a tool which helps us setting up those plans and test and tracking them easily. And at the same time, all these things will be useful with some code. And where do we need that to keep that code, right? So Azure repos come into picture, where we can manage our code repository, and with every check-in in that repo, basically good thing of keeping all these tools together is that we can easily link our Azure story with our code which someone is checking in, and how that code is linked to a certain test, right, and how it falls under a certain test plan. So it gives us a one good clear picture, right? So who delivered which story and what were the test cases executed. So that's where these tools comes together and helps us. So basically Azure App Repos is place where we keep our code repo, right? Then comes the Azure Artifacts. As we are moving towards different kind of architecture these days, right? Primarily microservices and all, right? So it's not about microservices. I just want to use that term because these things came into picture when we started talking about microservices and all a lot, right? So we need to create some packages, some artifacts which you want to put somewhere so that it can be shared, right? Easily. So something like NuGet package and npm packages and all. So this is the place where we keep our artifactories, right? So these are few tools which are provided in Azure DevOps. And primarily today we are going to talk about Azure Pipeline, how we are going to do our continuous integration, continuous deployment. That will be our primary focus today. Okay, so what is Azure Pipeline? Right, it's a very simple picture which is taken from again Microsoft documentation. It's a DevOps site. I'll share that link and again, so you can go ahead and read about it separately. But what about Azure Pipeline? Right? So this picture, I picked up this picture because it's in a very simple term, it explains everything, right? So if you see in the center, right? So it's nothing but a simple pipeline of multiple tasks, right? And that pipeline starts when someone puts their code into some repository, right? So as soon as some code is put into repository, there is a build agent, right? What is build agent? Build agent is someone which is going to help us to run those steps, right? Those tasks which are defined in this pipeline, right? And you might have heard of these build agents earlier also. It's not that something new in Azure DevOps only, right? But it used to be there with TFS servers and all also, right? So they basically help us to pick up that code, build that code, test it, verify, right, and then so on, whatever we want to add into pipeline. So this is again, as I mentioned, these are some common steps which every code takes, but depending on your team requirement, you might alter and add and remove steps in these pipelines, right? And at the end, we get artifacts which we can deploy on certain environment. It could be dev environment, QA, production, whatever it is, depending on maturity, depending on how comfortable we are with our processes, right? We can deploy those artifacts anywhere, right? So that's Azure Pipeline in a very simple terms, right? So it's a cloud service basically that you can use to automatically build, test, and deploy your code to any platform or cloud, right? So beauty of Azure pipelines. Now let's see a few of these things, right? So build agent. Let's start from here. So if you see, if you have a repository which consists of, let's say, only .NET code, right? You will need some machines which will have .NET framework, which will help you to build your code whenever that agent runs there, right? Similarly, if you have some other component, let's say some Python service, Python-based service, right, or some other node-based service which you want to build and all. So probably you might end up loading one agent with multiple SDKs which might be required to build those code services, right? But here in Azure Pipeline, it gives you those cloud-hosted agents, right? And those agents could be on Linux, Mac OS, or Windows, anything, right? So you don't have to do anything, basically. You don't have to set up those machines. Being a team who is setting up this process, right? You don't have to set up those machines. Those will be set up automatically by Azure DevOps for you, right? So that's one pain gone, okay? Because with every change in version of your, let's say, .NET framework, right? You will have to upgrade it into your build servers, build agent machine where your build agents are running and all, right? So all this thing is gone, right? So it supports containers also, right? So that's another thing which we are not going to cover today, but depending on your team maturity, there are many teams who have started using containers. So yeah, that support is also there. So let's say you have a team who is transitioning from code which used to be deployed on non-containerized environment, right? And now want to deploy it on a containerized environment. You don't need to do much, right? With simple changes in your pipeline and all, you can easily deploy, the same thing with the cloud-hosted agents on containerized environment, some Kubernetes-based environment, right? So when you get those artifacts, so here I'm just showing what is the CI part basically, right? So when you deploy these artifacts, right? Again, these artifacts can be deployed on VMs, can be deployed on serverless environment, can be deployed on clouds, can be deployed on premises, right? And can be deployed on Kubernetes, depending on if you are using containers. So that's the beauty. You don't have to worry about anything, right? Even if you are deploying your ultimate services, your project on cloud or on premises or on VM or serverless, right? You can still use same tool for all this purpose. Okay, so that's about Azure Pipeline. I'll move ahead and see how it looks like more in detail. Okay, so this Azure Pipeline, what does it consist of, right? So again, it's not that something very new, right? You might have, if you have not used Azure Pipelines on Azure DevOps, you might have used cruise control or TeamCD earlier or TFS builds, right? So there also we used to do same thing. Here we have made it very simple, right? So there will be some trigger which will initiate your build, right? And that trigger will be basically, in most of the cases, it will be a code checking, code commit by a developer, right? That developer that commit basically in a repository initiates a pipeline which has multiple stages. Okay, as we saw, right? And sorry. Right, so this pipeline is made up of multiple stages, and every stage has got multiple jobs, and these jobs run on different agents, right? So we can have a requirement specifically. For example, if you see, I'll probably at the end try to show it. Just before this session, I was doing preparation, and I thought that best to show Visual Studio Code, right? If you are aware of Visual Studio Code, it's something, it's which can run on your Linux environment, which can run on your Windows environment, which can run on your Mac OS, right? So that's the beauty of Visual Studio Code. So that's where, if a team who is working on Visual Studio Code kind of project, right, they might want to build every check-in for which will be targeted for Mac OS, which will be targeted for Linux, which will be targeted for Windows. So they will set up those different kinds of jobs which will run on different agents, and right, depending on their requirements, it will create the artifact which can be deployed in any of the environments, right? So every stage, when these agents pick up that job, every job will have these multiple steps, right? So these steps are nothing but basically these steps could be anything, right? Where you pull the code, you build the code, you run your unit test, you create the code coverage report, and so on, right? So these are the tasks, and as shown here, as part of this task, at the end you might publish build artifact, right? Or you can directly deploy. So this is about pipeline, right? So in this pipeline we can do anything. As part of that task, and then I want to deploy it to my app service on Azure, right? Or at the end of my last step could be that invoke a REST API which informs my team, or probably put something on my Teams channel or Slack channel that okay, this build is done with this code coverage, this result and all, right? So that's how we break it down, right? So first, pipeline will have multiple stages. Every stage will have jobs, right? These jobs can run independently on multiple agents, right? And these jobs can be interdependent, right? For example, a deployment job will always be dependent on integration job, right? Without integration, I cannot deploy anything, right? So we'll see how those can be linked. But with every job, within that job, there will be multiple steps, multiple tasks which can be executed. So that's how it will look at high level. I'll quickly see if there is any queries. Okay, I think last message is from someone who is getting some issue with the audio. Please feel free to send a message if you still are getting that audio message. Audio issue. Okay, I'll move it. So why Azure Pipelines, right? What's the importance of Azure Pipeline? There are multiple tools in market, right? But where it can help, right? What are the beauty of this tool, basically, right? So works with any language or any platform, right? So as I mentioned, if you have a repository of C# code, you have a repository of Python, Java, JavaScript, or PHP, Ruby, or Go, right? Everything, right? You don't have to do anything. You just have to define a task which will simply say that, okay, compile my Go code, right? And it will understand. We'll see what are those tasks briefly, right? So it will automatically understand that what it needs, which on that agent, right, to compile that code, which is written in, let's say, C#, right, or which is in Python, and it will get it there, and it will compile your code for you. Right, so many languages, at least all the famous languages you'll find are supported here. So deploys to different types of target at the same time, right? Targets include container registries, virtual machine, Azure services, or any on-premises or cloud targets, right? As I mentioned, so it could be anything. So you might have a need where some of the services might go on some virtual machines, right? And probably you might want some services to be hosted on app service, right? So you can do it without much changes for you. So this tool will help you to do this without asking dev to make any specific cautious steps to ensure that deployment goes on smoothly, right? So it will abstract most of the things there, and that's where it will help Dev's team basically. Integrates with Azure deployments, right? So on Azure you can deploy, as I mentioned that on cloud definitely you can do a deployment. So Azure is definitely you can do. Builds on Windows, Linux, or Mac machines depending on your need, as I mentioned earlier also in the previous slide, right? So if you want to build something on Windows for Windows environment, on Windows machine you want to build, you can do it. If you want to build something on Linux machine targeted for Linux environment, you can do it, and same is for Mac, right? So that's that easy, right? And in case you don't have a support for certain version of, let's say, Windows, for example, right? So or for that matter, let's say .NET latest version is not supported, which is in beta, right? And you want to do some POCs, do some you want to be ready for the latest version which is coming up for, from .NET, or for that matter any other language, right? So probably you will not get those agents already there, right? So you can set up your own agent also, right? So that's where you will set up your own agents, and you can build your code, your POCs, which you can work on beta versions. Okay? It integrates with GitHub and many other version control systems. Okay, so that's another beauty. GitHub, SVN, TFS. TFS I need to confirm, right? But yeah, there are many, and of course it has got its own repo also. So definitely it will integrate with that, right? So, but basically GitHub is nowadays it's very popular repository, especially for open source development. So it provides that integration. We'll see in today's lab that how to do it and how to quickly set up that pipeline, CI/CD pipeline for a repository in GitHub. And works with open source projects, right? So that also probably I'll quickly see show you. Right at the end of our lab. Okay, so this is one again GIF, and apologies, it is getting refreshed very soon. So I thought that this will be interesting to show what we are going to do today, right? So if you see on the left, there's a local PC from where some check-in is done, right? And there's a pipeline which is going to monitor that commit and which is going to pick up that code change through the repository, which can be shown here, right? You might be able to see my mouse icon moving around it, and there will be a YAML file where we'll be setting up our CI process, right? All those steps which we talked about, different steps which are required to build our code which we picked up, and at the end we'll produce a artifact which will be basically output which needs to be deployed on any environment, right? So we'll see what that artifact is, and then we'll set up another pipeline, which is a deployment pipeline, and that's where we call it CD, right? And that's where we'll start picking up that artifact, and that pipeline will help us to deploy that artifact on our cloud environment. Right here we are showing it as app service or not, where we'll be deploying our artifacts. Okay. So now for today's lab, as I mentioned, I picked up Azure Pipelines plus GitHub, right? So our repository will be in GitHub. We'll be picking up code from there. We'll be doing CI/CD, right, quickly. And what are the beautiful things which we are getting with GitHub, right? So primary thing, it's unlimited CI/CD minutes. Right, so take it with a pinch of salt. When I say unlimited, you will have to go through documentation, right? But I think for public repository, it's unlimited. But for private repository, there is some limit, right? I need to look into the documentation, what's that limit is. But yeah, ultimately for private repository also, you can do your POCs, you can see how it is working, and then probably your organization can adopt it. But for public repository, it's definitely unlimited for now. Right, so you can do any number of check-ins, any number of those pipelines will run multiple times, right? And yeah, so 10 parallel jobs to every GitHub open source project. So that's going to be 10 parallel jobs. If you are starting with it, probably you will not need it at all. But if you have a big project which you are planning to set up as an open source project on GitHub, right, it will give you 10 parallel jobs which can be executed, right, and it's all free, as I mentioned, right. So that's another beautiful aspect. Same infra as for paying customers. So this same infrastructure is getting used by customers who pay for their private repositories, right? As I mentioned, for private repository, there is some limit, right? So whoever want to host those private repositories, right, and integrate with Azure Pipeline, they will have to pay. But ultimately, people who are hosting open source project, for them, it's same infra. There is no change, nothing, no underlying infrastructure change, and yep, and that's one good thing. Many popular open source projects are using Azure Pipeline. As I mentioned, Visual Studio Code, one of very big project which is on GitHub, open source, free for everyone. Right, TypeScript is also on the same lines. Again, very popular project, open source and free on it's on GitHub. Right, so they are already using Azure Pipeline. Right, Atom is one of them. Right, I have not used Atom a lot, but yeah, at least Visual Studio Code and TypeScript is something which is very popular. I think anyone who is doing web development must be using TypeScript. At least they know about TypeScript. And very soon, same will be the case with Visual Studio Code. With, as I mentioned initially, right, you can do any language development with Visual Studio Code. So these are some beautiful aspects of Azure Pipeline with GitHub. Okay. Okay, I think I reached to the last of my slide. Now we will see that how to set up our Azure pipelines for continuous integration, continuous deliveries, right? Before that, I'll take a quick pause and I will stop my tab one. Okay, let me see if there is any query. I think there's something. Okay, so question is, could pipelines also be the same as data sources, or are they fully scripted codes waiting to be delivered to the agents? I didn't get the data sources part, but yeah, these are fully scripted codes basically, right? We'll see what are those tasks and how those are. For those tasks also are hosted on GitHub only, right? So these are scripted codes, as I understand correctly, and these will be delivered. So the agents will use these codes to to build the code and run the test and all those stuff. Brandon, sorry if I have not answered you correctly because I didn't understand the first part correctly. Could pipelines also be the same as data sources? Right. So if you can clarify, I'll probably come back again. I'll try to answer it. Okay, so moving ahead. So I'll quickly show you what all is here. So this is one sample code which is picked up, right? It is from one of the very popular Qantas airline code sample, which you might have seen in multiple places, multiple examples, and it is so popular now that everyone understands what's the use case, right? What's the scenario. But we are not going to cover that scenario. So basically, it's just understand that this is a code repo which is there for our team, and this code repo we want to host on our Azure, right? And this is in GitHub. Okay, so what all it has, right? It's in Node, right? It requires Node version 8.9 or later if you want to run a local machine. It requires Azure Cosmos DB. So I'm not going to run it on my machine, all right? Because I have deleted all the instances of Cosmos DB to avoid any charges which I can incur if I keep those runs, keep them running. But we are going to set it up on Azure and see that how it is going to run on Azure itself, right? Yeah, so this is more about documentation which is required to set up locally, right? But we are not going to look into it much. Now this is something where we need to dev.azure.com, right? This is where we are going to set up our project. We are going to set up our pipeline for continuous integration, and after that we are going to set up our pipeline for continuous delivery, right? So this is about that. Again, this link, I'm just showing it here. There might be some queries which I might not be able to answer immediately, right? And similarly, if you are going through this session again or going through some labs later on, independently you are doing some POCs, this is a very good link where you will get most of your answers, right? So I'm just keeping it here, and at the end of the deck there will be a link shared which you can use again, right, to refer to any part which we might not be covering here. In fact, there will be a lot which I will not be able to cover everything, but yeah, this you'll get here. Wait, what happened? Why it came here? Yeah, it's gone. And yeah, apart from that, there will be Azure portal which will be required where I'll be hosting our code, right? But again, you just need Azure account here. We will be creating our infrastructure through this code. We'll be seeing how to do that through ARM templates, right? We'll be seeing how to set up that pipeline through our YAML files, and yep, that's about it. So let's begin. I have pulled this code on my machine just to show if in case there is something which is required to be seen clearly here, right? But it has a very basic structure, very basic Node.js project, right? There are a few things which you'll note here, right? And this is the Azure Pipeline.yaml file, right? And that is what we are going to use to build our pipeline, CI pipeline, right? And after some time, probably I'll cover when we look at the deployment. In case I miss it, you can again ask me. There are no chance I'll miss it, but these are some deployment files which will help us to set up our infrastructure which are required to host our code, right? So these are the few things which we'll be seeing. I'm not going into this code, and you don't need to understand Node programming and all. You just understand that this is some code which we want to compile, test, and deploy, right? We want to integrate it. Okay, so move ahead. Where is that? Okay, so let's create a project. So this is one organization which you create. I'll not go in each and every details, right? Our focus will be continuous integration first, right? So this is an organization which I set up after creating my account on dev.azure.com. And if you remember in the beginning, I said that in case you have experimented with visualstudio.com, which is the same thing, I think I created this account around 4 or 5 years back, right? That time it used to create a URL like this, but it's same, right? So today I'll be using the latest one. My organization is set up on dev.azure.com. I'll be creating a new project which will have my pipeline, right? So I'll call it Reactor Reactor CI. Oh, no, that's the project. So Reactor London, I'll just name it Reactor London project. Okay, I'll keep it public. Okay, and I'll show you why I want to keep. So one thing is that there are, as I mentioned, right, there are unlimited benefits with public repository of GitHub, right? And I think it's same for pipelines also, but it's good to have a public project in case you are linking it with your public Git repo, right? And we'll see with Visual Studio Code how it will help us when people want to see your build pipeline status. Okay, this is version control, work item process. This is something which you don't need to understand for now. These are advanced things. So I'm just creating a project. I named it. Okay, create a learning project, right? So now, as soon as I create this project, you will see that here you will get all these tools which I talked about, right? So this is board, this is repo, this is pipeline, test plan, and artifacts, right? So I'll quickly set up, go to settings and remove other things just to avoid any confusion whenever I see a lot of icons on my screen, I get confused, right? If it is not required. So I'll just keep the pipelines in the project, right? I can do many other settings, but right now I don't want to focus there. Okay. So here now we just have got pipeline, right? So in this project, we have a pipeline. Now we have to create a continuous integration pipeline, right? So what we need to do. So before I do anything, so I have a project here. Let's say I've forwarded from somewhere, or I created this project. One important thing for GitHub to link this GitHub repo with my pipeline, right? Because I want to start my pipeline for every check-in, right? We need to go to marketplace. Okay, and here if you I search for it, so it's already there. Search for Azure Pipelines. Okay, this one, Azure Pipeline. I have already installed it. It's again a free component, right, which you can add. Azure Pipelines, and here it is given details at what all are possible with it, right, which basically shows build on Linux, Mac OS, Windows, do a unit testing, functional testing, so on, right, which is what we are going to set up, right, and it's all free. So you install it. When you install it, it will ask you with which repo you want to integrate. If you are doing some POC, you want to integrate with one repo, you just integrate with one repo. Otherwise, you can integrate with all the repos also, right, which should be fine. So this is one important thing, to integrate our GitHub repo to Azure Pipeline. Okay, I'll go back to my code. Okay, so that's about setting up. That's the only thing which is required in your GitHub repo, right? Nothing else, and it's all free. Now you can directly jump to your Azure Dev, where we created one project after creating an organization, right? So this is my project for my organization, and in this project I want to create a pipeline. So I'll click on Create Pipeline. This is my first pipeline which I'm going to build. Okay, now it is asking me where is a code, to which code you want to link. So as I mentioned, right, we can link it to multiple repos, which is Azure repos, Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise Server, other Git, and Subversion, right? These are there. We want to link it with GitHub, so I just clicked on it. It's a step-by-step process which will guide us how to link us. So there are multiple codes, right, which to which you want to link. I want to link it to sample CA, right? I'll select that this is the repo to which I want to link my pipeline. Okay, now you see, as soon as I clicked on that, I can see that there is this Azure Pipeline.yaml file which is created, right? Let me quickly see, it is there. Yeah, it is already there, right? So when you are setting up your project, you might not have this. Okay, if you don't have this, nothing to worry. As soon as you select your repo, you will get an option that you want to create Azure this pipeline, and as soon as you say yes, you will get this here, right? So now let's see what you want to do in this YAML file, and this is the same YAML file which I opened here. Okay, this is my master branch. Oops, it is not YAML. It is, there it is. There's a default name which will be picked up, right? I will make some space. Okay, now briefly let's understand what this YAML file is going to do. So it is saying that from our agent pool, I want a VM image of Ubuntu 16.04, right? So I get a VM image which will have Ubuntu 16.04, right? So sorry. So yeah, so I want to build my code on a Windows server, so that's where I will request for a VM image, right, of Ubuntu 16.04, and with Visual Studio Code you will get all these helps also, right, as soon as you go over this text, right, which mention what do we need and what do you want to do. Similarly, you want to say that, okay, when do I want to trigger my pipeline? right? So every pipeline needs to be triggered, right? So these are few basic things which are there for every kind of every integration. Here we are saying that whenever there is something in master branch, right? Anything which gets checked into master branch, then I want to trigger this pipeline, and this pipeline will have these steps, right? So now what are the other options for trigger? We generally don't work on master, right? This is for demo purpose. We are showing that, okay, we want to do it. We will probably build, we will have a pipeline which will run on master when we do when we merge some code, right? When we accept some pull requests from someone. But most of the time we'll be working on some feature branch where we want to run this pipeline as soon as some checking is done, right? So what are the options? So for this, that's where I showed you. Whenever you have got such kind of query, you can always go here, you can search, and you will get those options in this document. And yep, like this one, yep. So yeah, it is a very good document where you will find all those options, right? So if you are coming from a background with Jenkins or something else, right? These are similar concepts, but you will have to find some way to define those things in your YAML file, right? So here it is showing that I want to trigger my build whenever there is something in master, whenever there is something in release slash any branch which start from release with this name, right? And you might want to remove this master. You just might want to keep a release slash start, right? Depending on your need. So this is what trigger is. And after that, when your build pipeline is triggered, right? So we are saying that, okay, when it is triggered, when we trigger it, we need this VM image, and these are the steps which needs to follow. Now let's quickly look into these steps, right? And that's where I think there was this query, right? Okay, there is some query again. Yeah, I think Brendan asked that what are these tasks, right? Kind of. So I mentioned that these are codes. So Brendan has another query. I meant data sources such as tables from Excel or Google Sheets also be the same as data sources. Doesn't sound applicable in this case, though, based off what you said. Okay, I hope Brandon has got his answer. I'm still not very clear that what we want to pick up from data sources such as tables from Excel and Google Sheet. Is there a reason you are using GitHub rather than a DevOps repo? Oh yeah, there is no specific reason, right? This is a question from Grant. So there is no specific reason for this particular demo I picked up because GitHub is a very popular repo, right? And more, what I want to show in this lab is that how we can integrate our open source project easily with Azure Pipeline without any cost, and get the maximum benefit. That's the purpose to show here, right? Otherwise, you can do the same thing with DevOps repo also. Just because GitHub is very popular, that's why I picked it up. Okay, moving ahead. So these are the tasks, and these are some basic tasks which are there, which is saying copy file at 2, right? So these are something which you need to understand in YAML, again, this document, right? So these are some predefined tasks, right? And within those, they have steps. So you can consider them as normal functions which have got all those code written, which will help you to, execute certain step. So here we are saying that this is one copy files task. If I do a control space, I think I should get a let me see this. Yeah, see, so there are multiple tasks defined and all these are on GitHub. Okay, there are multiple such. So depending on your need, you will have to do some little bit of research depending on your need, what do you need. And again, as I mentioned, that documentation here, you can get those tasks listed, at least all those basic tasks listed here, right? So you can pick up, yeah, here it is. Right, so build tasks, utility tasks, .NET, Android, and all those, so on, so forth, right? So I'm just trying to show you so that you can work independently later on. Okay, so this is one task which is of version 2. So someone has written steps within it that how to copy these files, and this is the second version. So this is the way of versioning this task, right? And due to some need, we might want to use old version or some other version depending on how many versions are there, right? So here we are saying that copy files to this what we want to use. Display name, we'll see that how in pipelines. So whenever we run any build, right, we want to see how those steps are proceeding, right? So we want to see all those steps. It will show me what is happening with my pipeline at that point of time. And these are the inputs. Every task, as I mentioned, these are more like functions, right? You pass on those input parameters, and then based on those input parameters, this task will work for you, right? So it is saying that this is the source folder, this is the content which I want to copy, this is the target folder where I want to copy, right? Again, it's difficult to remember all those input parameters. You can easily find these tasks in GitHub or probably in that documentation of Azure DevOps, right? So first thing I copied, this is just a task just to show that what are those tasks here, right? Second, npm version 1, again another task, right? Which is saying npm custom command we're running, install production, right? So these are some npm commands and so on, right? So this is how we are going to run this task, right? I'll not go into detail of each and everything, but we'll see that how those tasks are going to help us, right? And at the end we are going to publish those artifacts. So moving back to my pipeline. Okay, so here, as I mentioned, right, so when I created my first pipeline, I mentioned that from which repo I want to pick up. It is showing me this repo, right? So all those setups are done. You might get a pop-up to enter credentials of your repo and all, right? So those are basic steps, self-explanatory, so no need to go into details there. And it picked up this file. If this file is not there, as I mentioned, it will identify which kind of code you are having. Is it a C# code or a Node code or a Python code? And accordingly, it will suggest what kind of task can be added here, right? So this is what it did. It picked up Azure Pipelines or the YAML file, and same steps are here. Okay, now I'll not go much into detail, and I'll quickly run it to show what it is doing. One more. Okay, so I started this. It is running. Okay, come on. I'll go. So within my, I'm going to this within my project, within pipelines. I'm going to pipelines again, right? And if here you will see that this pipeline which I just defined, right? It has taken some default name. I can change those names and all, but it started running now, right? It is running. So it was waiting for some agent to be allocated from the pool, right? Once that agent is allocated, my first commit is done and it is running that job, right? So if I click on it here, when I click, I'll go into it and I can see what all is happening with my job, right? So this is initialization of job, checked out this code. It understood that, okay, I need to get this code from GitHub. It checked out all that code, right? And then it copied a file. This is the first task. If you remember, we have defined there, right? So it is copying some JSON files. Right here you see those JSON files. So all these steps, we have not done anything. We just passed on those parameters. What need to be copied, where need to be copied, right? So if I go back here, just to see the copy, build.artifacted directory templates, and it is showing me that, okay, this is the artifacted directory. It already picked up, and that's where it is deploying, right? And now it is running that npm command, which is the second step. So we can always go through it and see what is happening here. Let me finish. Next step was archive files. Okay, and then publish in some drop location. Right, so this is finished. Now, if I go back, so this helps with us logging and all. This logs basically help when we try to understand what is happening with our code. Okay, now here, coming back to my pipelines and pipeline again. Okay, so see, this is a recent. It is showing that checkbox. All right, first commit. I didn't mention any commit command and all, but that's fine. This is the first commit which happened. Right, it shows me all the status. So once we run it multiple times during our lab, we'll see that what all the status are coming here. Right, and yeah, so these are basically things which we can see here. I will click here. So branches, once we start doing more and more build, we'll get those things when it is green, when it was red, and so forth. It's historical stuff, so we can easily see those things. And again, analytics. Right now there is nothing much, right? So now when we start adding our unit test and all, we'll start seeing more details here about the analytics. Okay. So here, okay, before coming to that. Oh yeah, I'll come to it. So that is one basic pipeline, right? So one basic pipeline which did a simple compilation for us, and it finished it, and it published an artifact here, right? If I click on this artifact, I go here, I see that there is this zip file, which basically I can download, and probably my QA team or some team member can pick it up and deploy it on their machine and see how it is working. Templates is something which we'll see when we talk about deployment, right? Why we are deploying it here and what's the use of it. Okay, so these are the artifacts which are created at the end of our pipeline, our continuous integration pipeline, right? So now when this thing is happening, right? If I go back here, I refresh it here. Okay, you will see that, okay, this code is there. Now let's say someone comes to our code repo in GitHub and try to see, you might have seen that there's information about our code health, right? That what was the last pipeline status, whether it was compiled properly or not, and all the stuff. And then we call them status badges, right? So that is one good thing which you can integrate quickly within a minute here. If you go here, okay, go back to, okay, so from here, if you see, there is this status badge. Okay, just click on it, you'll get the sample markdown, right? If you want to use image somewhere that you can use it, most of the time you will be using markdown for your GitHub repo, right? For a master branch. Okay, I copied it. You just have to go here, put at the top, paste it, that's it, right? And added badge, and that's coming. Okay, wow, see, so now I got the status which is saying Azure Pipeline succeeded, which shows my user that, okay, this is code, whoever checked in or whoever merged that code in the last, based on that, right now my code health is very good. The right pipeline was successfully built. Now that user can click on it and see pipeline here, right? And see what all happened in that job, right? That's where I said that when you create this project, if you create it public, then that user will be able to access those details. Otherwise, if you keep it private repo, probably that user will not be able to access that, right? So depending on what you want to do, you can set up your project accordingly in Azure pipelines, right? So here that user can come and see. Now let's quickly see how it looks like for you will, because this is something which helps us to learn a lot when we set up first repo for ourselves, right? I'm going to Visual Studio Code repo. I think I typed it wrong. Visual Microsoft VS Code. This is one repo, right? As I mentioned, it's open source, right? This is the repo. Here, if you come here, there are many other batches also, right? Depending on those pipelines and all. But you see, we'll just focus on this one. So it is showing that our status was green, right? When whoever build did that last build. If I click on it, So this will basically help us to understand how to set up our own repo whenever we start with it, right? So that's where I find it very useful to go through the pipelines of popular, code repos and all. So here, okay, I came here. If you see here, this is the pipeline, and based on the last successful status, I came here. Now note this 3 jobs which got executed, right? So one was for Windows, another was for Linux, and third one was for Mac OS. Right. At the same time, you can easily go here. You can see the test status, pass percentage 99.99%, total tests, how much was executed and all. We have not integrated test in our project so far, but yeah, very soon we are next step we are going to do that. But this is what you are going to understand what is happening here, right? So the pipeline. Oops. I want to check the steps, and I came to wrong place. 1 second. So I go to Windows. Yep, here it is. Okay, so that job, Windows job, what all got executed, right? So these steps basically help us that what all we can do, right? When we are starting with these steps, with this, and all the steps are defined, right? Checkout code, node tool, probably it's installation of node tool installer, yeah, right? So yeah, yarn and so on, right? Whatever is required here, run unit test. So that's how you can start investigating into the repo of these famous open source projects. You can learn that, okay, how to utilize this thing. And similarly for Linux project, what were the changes? What are the different steps which are done for Linux job, right? And so these are multiple jobs which can be found here, right? So that's about badges. Okay, now we'll quickly add one test step to execute our unit test and see how it behaves and what all information it shows to us. Oops. Okay, I'll come back to Linux. I'll quickly check if there is any question. No question so far, which is fine. So this is the status which we have added. Now let's quickly try to edit it. So one quick thing which I want to show before I go to status, because when doing that practice, I noticed that people who are new might face this issue. So when you pick up this badge information, right, and see, so one quick thing which I want to show. As soon as I checked in this code added badge, right? So what I did was that I added a badge here in readme.md file and checked it in. As I checked in, my pipeline was saying that I should trigger whenever there is any change in the master branch, right? And that's where that second job started, and that finished successfully. If you see here, right? This was my first commit. Second is the added badge thing. Okay. So yep, coming back to the badges. Okay, sometimes you might have set up here in your project which will not allow you to see those pictures of badges. Okay, and that's where you need to set up these configurations. Let me quickly go to the Reactor Learn Done project. Permissions, setting, connection, settings. I think here it is. Yeah. So this is the setting which will help you to get that badge back if you are facing that issue, right? So, oh sorry, this is variables. This is not badge. I'm so sorry. I'll go back. I think it's set up at my org level, organization settings. There are a lot of settings, but because people are interested in setting up badges, yeah. So here you see it is saying disable anonymous access to badge. It's not an anonymous access, so that's why I was able to see it, but otherwise anonymous access will be disabled. Right, so anyone else who want to set up that badge into their repo will not be able to do that. Right, and so yeah, keep that thing in mind if you face any issue. Coming back here, my session, reactor learn done, and I'll go to pipeline. Again, the pipeline. I'll edit it. Okay, so I've kept those steps with me. I will quickly put them here. Okay, so now our files are here. Input command, install production. Let's say after these steps, I want to run my unit test. So I will add a step here. I just copy pasted here, but you will get all that information with this here, right? So I want to run a script which says npm install npm test, displaying this, and there are a few steps which are required for getting the code coverage. So I'm just adding 2 steps here. And if you have worked on YAML, you'll see that okay, these red lines here, right? Because these are not indented properly, just like Python and all, it requires proper indentation. Okay, so what I added here is, so npm install, npm test, it will run the test, and then it will publish test result into some folder, right? And after publishing, I'm using coverage.tool to read the coverage, which is generated by my test execution, right? So I added these steps. So generally, in every pipeline, you will have these basic steps, right, where you will compile your code first. Probably we should start from the package pull part, right? So you will pull the package which are required in your project. If it's a Node project, probably npm packages, or if it's a .NET project, probably NuGet packages, which you'll try to restore. All right, and then you will build your code, and then you will run your test cases and see the coverage. Right. So these are some basic steps which you want to do before you publish your code. Right. So I will just save it. As soon as I save it, it will be checked in because this is integrated with my GitHub right now. See, it is giving me this pop-up saying that what I want to whether I want to commit here and what will be my commit message. I will just keep that commit message as it is. I'll save it. And that's it. I will not run it right now because as per our YAML file, we have mentioned that it should run as soon as I commit that code. I'll come back to my GitHub to check whether it came back here or not. So update Azure Pipeline, I'm for 21 seconds ago, right? So this is checked in here. I will go back, check here. See, I have not started this build, but it is automatically triggered with the checking. Right, so one basic pipeline, continuous integration pipeline, is done. Right, here we can come back. These are previous 2 runs. This will be my third run where the job is running. I can go into it. I can see the steps. Okay, while it is running, I'll come back and check what else is there, if there is any query or anything else which I want to cover. Okay, no new query. Okay, people are, I think, facing some issue, but yeah, with the teams, I think. Okay, so it is building now. It is running my test, and very soon we'll see all those matrices which are there, right? And for our demo purpose, I'm showing check-ins through this pipeline. But basically, what we are trying to do is we are trying to keep those steps. So that's where DevOps concept comes into picture, right? Where do you keep these steps? How to keep it? So in traditional organization, generally you see those steps, those automations or scripts, those are managed by ops team. right? Or rather, I should say those are controlled by ops team, right? And that's where DevOps said that, okay, let's work together, right? So probably there will be a team which will help us with the initial setup. And then with the initial setup, after initial setup, that team will hand it over to dev team so that we can keep our setup file very close to our repo, right? And that become more important when we talk about microservices, where we have got multiple repos for multiple services, right? So every services requirement might be different, right? There might be services which are basic business logic services, which are functional services. There might be services which might be required for some probably for some data factory kind of requirements and all, right? So everyone will have some different requirements. So it makes sense that if we create their scripts separately and keep them very close to their code, right? And that's where we keep these scripts with the code which we want to build and integrate. So yeah, so that's about this YAML file. You can of course rename this file when if you required. I'll quickly go back, check what's the status. This is VS Code. I'll close it. Yeah, it's still running on. Meanwhile, I'll check badges I wanted to cover. It is done. And tests we are running. Okay, it is going on. I just want to see the reports. Pipeline. Okay, now it should be fast. Cool, it's almost done. Publish artifact, and now we'll see what are the artifacts which are published, right? We have added a step to build a code. We have added a step to generate code coverage report, right? So let's come here. Now see, so this was not there earlier. These reports were not there because there was no steps there, right? So, but I just added a step. I just said that, okay, run those test cases, and now I got this report automatically. Nothing to do, right? No special. Of course, it requires a basic tool which will generate the XML file as a part of your test execution, right? And then that file will be used to generate these reports, right? So coming back here, it is clearly showing me there were 40 tests which got executed, 100% execution, pass, fail status. We can generate a detailed report here, right? If I want to see failed and aborted tests, if I want to see all the tests, it will show me here if I select it. So everything is there, right? I will not go into detail. You can explore it further. Okay, coming back because I want to cover quickly deployment part. And similarly, this is code coverage report. Again, for every file, you can see the coverage. You can see what all is there, what all is missed. All right. Here you can see that these lines are covered, and if there is any line which is missed, it will be shown in pink or reddish color. Okay, quickly going back here, earlier there was one thing which was published. Now you'll see that apart from drop, there is one code coverage report that is also published. This is also an artifact, right? And this becomes useful if, as part of your DevOps process, let's say you want to publish it so that person who has triggered this build want to analyze why code coverage dropped and all, right? So this is the artifact which is produced, which can be downloaded, and then that person can easily analyze, right, on the on his machine, on his or her machine, right? So that's about continuous integration part. Now we have created a build and we need to do a deployment. Okay, so there will be separate pipeline. So there are many places where you will find that people have integrated deployment also with this pipeline, which can also be done, which is fine, right? But generally, Azure Pipeline provides you a facility where you can trigger pipeline independently, right? So most of the time you might have a requirement you want to trigger UAT pipeline or production pipeline independently. You don't want to integrate with your build. Otherwise, with every check-in, it might deploy your artifacts on UAT environment and production environment, and it might disturb the things going on there, right? Depending on your scenario. If your team is very mature, you might want to do that also. But yeah, so coming back to releases, right? So now we say that, okay, we want to set up a release pipeline. which will help us to deploy our code. So here will come again a new pipeline which will generate. Okay. Now, when I say new pipeline, there are many templates depending on our need. When you go through it, there are multiple. So if you want to do a deployment on a service fabric, right, and similarly you might have something for Kubernetes. Okay, I'm not able to find it out, but yeah, there are basically a lot of templates which are already there. Yeah, here it is. Right, so Kubernetes cluster. So depending on your need, you can pick up that template and use it. Right, if you want some Docker images to be deployed on some Kubernetes knowledge. Here, to keep it simple, I'm just picking up. I'm using that empty job. Right, where is the okay. Right, so this is something, some artifact which needs to be added, right? From where to pick up that artifact. If I need to release something, I need that artifact. Now we are quickly going to add that artifact. I'll click on add artifact, right? And then in this pipeline, I can say that from where to pick it up. As part of my requirement, I might be putting it up anywhere, right? And that could be, so for now, we'll be picking up through our CI build. Right, but probably we might have pushed it into Azure artifacts, right, or probably some other place, basically. Yeah, so and it could be anything. So we'll start from here. Okay, here we'll define what is the source build pipeline, right? Who built it? Because we are saying that this is the build which we want to pick up, so it has to be somewhere through our pipeline. Right, I'm just saying that it should be latest. You can pick up specific version and all depending on your strategy, defined strategy within your organization, within your team, and you say add, right? It's a source alias. You can give any name, but this is the default which came. Okay, so first thing is done. I said that okay, this is the artifact which I want to pick up to deploy. Now, when do I want to trigger it? Right, that is important, right? Because one way could be that I don't want to trigger it at all. I want to make it manual altogether. Or another way could be that I want to trigger it. And I will say that, OK, continuous deployment trigger. As soon as my build is done, I want to enable it. And as soon as my build completes, I want to trigger this pipeline, which will start my release process. OK, just to show in a demo. In your real life scenario, you might not have that kind of requirement, right? You might want to do it manually, so you will not select it. Or you can say that, OK, we have a big project. It's not something lightweight, which you want to deploy every time because deployment takes 2 hours or something like that. You can schedule it, right? So that depends on your need. So I'm saying that my deployment continuous integration deployment finish. As soon as it finishes, I will trigger this. Now I will say that, OK, in this stage, I want to add some tasks. OK, now what are those tasks which we want to add, right? So, okay, one thing before I add, so just I want to show you in the code what we are going to do. So I talked about these deployment files, right? So what we want to do generally in such kind of deployment is, especially if it's going on cloud, right? We set up our environment, we generate our environment, right, through ARM templates, especially in Azure, or it could be based on your Terraform. There are tasks for Terraform also. If your team is using Terraform, you can think of that also. But here I'm using ARM templates. So this is nothing but it is again, if you are aware of ARM, it's infrastructure as code. In code form, I am writing that what I want to set up as an infrastructure for my deployment, right? So first step, I will set up my infrastructure, and second file is about the parameters which I want to pass to my this ARM template, because as we know on cloud, we might generate a machine which and names and all those things will be dynamic, which will be generated, right? So we might want to pass on some parameters depending on need, like which kind of environment it is, right? Site prefix, which I want to control. Let's say I am setting up 2 U8 environment for my organization, right? So I can provide those kind of prefix depending on need and so on, right? So these are some variables which will be done. And once my environment is set up, and this is all ARM, you can again, go through YouTube channel of Microsoft Data, and definitely you'll find something which details, which describes usage of ARM in a better way, right? But yeah, as an output, once my environment is set up, I want to get the name of my app service, right, which I've deployed. Okay, which is web, or there might be need that after setting up my machine, I want to get the name of my machine because I want to use it as an input parameter for something else, right? So these are few things which will be taken care of in ARM. And again, as I mentioned, in terms of microservices or projects which try to keep everything close, right? As I mentioned for YAML file, we try to keep all those deployment related stuff also very close to our source control, right? And we put those ARM templates here, probably in some folder within this code itself. Okay, so for now it is there. Now what we are going to do here, right? So before that, when we generate those resources on Azure, right? Generally we try to control those resources within a resource group, right? We'll generate an app service, we'll generate a CosmoDB, we'll generate a MongoDB also as part of this deployment, right? So for this, I want to set up a resource group, and that name I want to control so that I can delete or update it as per my need later on, right? So it gives me a better control. So I'll say my resource group. I'm just saying this variable name, setting up this variable name, resource group, and I will say, the spelling is fine. And resource group is Reactor today. I'm just giving some random names, right? I think I will control it quickly. OK, so I created this variable. I will see where we'll use it. I'll quickly go back to my task, right? So this is the agent job which I want to do. Now what I want to do here. So first thing, I want to set up I want to use ARM template for my deployment, right? So I will. So there again, there are multiple tasks here, and you can use anything. If I search for ARM, okay, this is already added here. Otherwise, you can, if you don't find it in the top two here, which says Add button, you can go back. You can click on Install. It is already installed. So let's say it's not installed. You will get it. Some button like Get It Free. You will get click on Get It Free, and you will get that from the marketplace, right? And then I will click it. I will add this template, right? So this is the ARM template which will help me to do a deployment. I'll click on it. I'll make some changes. The ARM code which is there, the ARM JSON file that supports version 2. And that's where I change it. Now to which Azure account I want to install, I will select. I have already logged in at many places, so that's why it is showing me this. I will quickly move it here to enter my credential on another window. I'm doing it. .com. And that's it. Once I do it, my authentication is done, and now I can access it here. Oh, sorry, yeah. So this is authorizing. Why it is showing authorizing still? Okay, yeah, it is done. Now I'm saying that this is my Azure detail, create or update resource group. So every time I run this thing, first time it will create it, second time it will update it, right? And that's about usage of ARM. You can separately see about it here. What is the resource group which you want to use, right? So whether I want to deploy something on the existing resource group which are already there, or I want to deploy on a resource group which I named, right? So if you remember, I created a resource group name. So I'm just putting that name here. Okay, that variable name basically will come here. Location, it could be anything depending on your need. I'm just putting it here. Again, on Azure, where do you want to deploy? Okay, this is template. Okay, which template do you want to use? Now here comes the ARM template, right? So this is the template which I want to use for my deployment. Within this template, I have mentioned what all services I want to create for myself, right? App service, Cosmos, DB, and all. and what are the parameters which I want to use. So similarly, that's where we want to keep it close to our code, right? And want to generate as an artifact, because it might change with as you proceed with your code, right? But again, there is no hard and fast rule. As per your team's convenience, you can do that thing. Now you see, I got this parameter, but sometimes due to some need, you might want to override those things. So if I click on this button, it reads all the parameters which are defined in that file. I showed it in Visual Studio Code here. All these names are here. If there is anything which I want to change, right? So I will just put GitHub CI34, whatever it is. I just kept a random name. OK. OK, so it will override it, whatever is there in parameter file. And yep, that's about the files, those steps which I want to do. Right. So once this is done, right, this step is done, right? So what next we want to do? Now, whatever we are doing now, we want ARM output, whatever infrastructure is generated. I want name of that infrastructure so that I can use it for further deployment and all, right, depending on my need. So there is another task which says ARM output, right, which you can add. So we are just creating a workflow, right? Sequence of tasks which needs to be done for deployment. I clicked on it again. Azure RM subscriptions. I selected one resource group. Again, I will say $, because that's a variable name which I created. I want to be consistent throughout resource group. So you'll create those variables. I think that's it. Correct. So once that infrastructure is created, I have captured the name of the infrastructure services which are created. Right now, I want to deploy my Azure App Service. Right. So this part is done. I will add another task, and I will say App Service. Okay, it should be App Service deploy. I want to deploy it, right? So there is another task. So there are multiple tasks, right? So probably I'm going a little fast just to complete it. We are only 7 minutes over, but apologies for that. I will just quickly complete it, right? So that we can conclude it appropriately, right? So this is my Azure App Service. Okay, and Azure subscription. I will select subscription. I'm just looking for app service name. Okay, so this is app service name which I created, and now this is one hardcoded thing which I can do. And if you see here, I said that this will be the output, right? This will have output, and it will have this variable value, right? And these variables will get value based on whatever infrastructure is created as part of this step. So I'm saying that as part of output, I want this variable here. Okay, my app service name will be this variable, not the fixed name, because with every deployment it might change, right? That's the beauty of Azure or any cloud service. Oh, I think I used wrong basis, right? And that's it. Okay, now these are steps. So first step, I did the I created my infrastructure where I'll be doing deployment. I read the output based on the infrastructure which is created. I use that output to do my deployment, and at the end I will get the output which will be my app service URL, which I will be using to access it. Right, I will save it, and for now just save it here only. That's it, right? So this is my service, my deployment service, which is created, right? And now, oops, did I miss to? Okay, yeah, this is my new release pipeline. So sorry, I named it. It's a bad name, but yeah. So I'll say create release. So as soon as I say create release, it will say, okay, do you want to start? I'm just keeping everything default. I will say create, right? Now it has queued the release pipeline, which is here. And as soon as I get the appropriate agent allocated, it will start. my deployment. It might take some time. I've done the previous deployment. I'll quickly try to show what it will do. Okay, let it start first. It is queued. Okay, yeah. If you see, it is started 1 out of 3 tasks. It is generated again, similar to our CI build. I can click and see what is happening. Right? It might work, it might not work depending on the input we have given. And if there is something, we can look into log and see how it is done. Right? So as part of my preparation for this session, I did a few deployments. And let me go to resource group. I fully run session. One. Contour, yeah, I think this is the one. I'll quickly check. It should be something similar if it is the same one, right? So you see, these all artifacts are created as part of that deployment release cycle, right? So we have not covered how to generate that ARM. If you understand how to generate ARM, it's a simple process, right? It's, as I mentioned, infrastructure as a code, which will help us as first step to generate these services, these artifacts on our Azure platform. And once that is done, I can easily go to my app service. For now, I'm directly going here. Or let me see if I have got previous things. So this is the project. It will take some time because first time it is generating those infrastructure thing. I will quickly go here, see if there is something available as part of my practice. How to probably brand new. I think so. So we'll go to releases. Yeah, it looks like this is the one, right? So again, it is something similar. I have a pipeline which is continuous integration. We saw all those things in the detail, right? And now this is the release pipeline here. Okay, good that it is deployed. It is very similar, right? I'm going here. It was manually triggered, and then a deployment happened. I click on it. Okay, all these details will be there. Oops. So I go to logs, and as part of logs, right? So this one also executed all those steps. So if you see download artifacts, first step, as part of trigger, it got those artifacts. After that, it created infra ARM. This is the first step, next step, which we did. Then ARM output, it captured the output to be passed to my app service deploy. Once it is deployed, if I go to here and see the logs, right at the end, I will see the URL which will be generated for my after my deployment, right? So this URL, if I copy and paste, hope I have not shut it down, I have not deleted it. If it's not deleted, it will show that contour here which is deployed. Meanwhile, yeah, right. So this is the first full deployment. I'll quickly go back and see if by chance that deployment is complete. Reactor London, pipeline, release pipeline, it is still going on, right? No worries. But yeah, so these are the few steps. So we are almost close here. ARM output is still pending. And see, if you see, this is generating all those services and all on Azure. So it will take some time after first deployment. Again, you don't. It will automatically take care of using the same info which is generated, and it will be faster, right? So, and that's how it will be deployed. So that's about deployment. So overall, we covered 2 parts today, right? So how to generate a build pipeline, which will be the first, very simple. It will have simple steps. How to get our code, how to do a deployment. How to get our code, how to run unit test on that, and how to ensure the coverage, right? And second step where we saw that how to generate our deployment pipeline. And as generally, you will see that you will need one more step, which is something like stop deployment if your code coverage dropped, right? So we have got those tasks also. You can research for those tasks, and as I mentioned, this document is best for those things. And those tasks generally we add it in our deployment, where we in the beginning we see that okay, if deployment dropped below 60%, then don't allow any deployment. Right, those kind of stuff can be found there. Now coming back to my deck, if there is anything pending, I'll quickly check. Okay, so yeah, we have covered most of the things in the last. I just want to check this we have covered. Okay, yep, I think everything is covered. Important links which I want to share is what Microsoft Learn. Here you will find a lot of tutorials basically to learn different things, be it DevOps or development or anything else, right? And about Azure and all stuff. And specifically for DevOps documentation, you can go here. And most important, if you are very interested in DevOps and if you are one who want to achieve something in DevOps, and then this is the best place where you can go, AzureDevOpsLabs.com, where you will find a lot of labs, similar kind of lab, and you can do those hands-on exercise and learn how Azure Pipelines can help you in overall DevOps journey with CI/CD. Right? Of course, there are many other things, but these are the best things. At the end, and I apologize for 15 extra minutes. I just want to cover those few things. I will quickly go back to Teams to check if there is any question, and here's the survey link. Please do fill this survey. Okay, I think last question was from Grant, and there's a thanks a lot message in the last. I will wait for a minute if there is any query. Okay, if there is nothing else, thanks a lot, and apologize again for 16 more minutes in the session. Emma, over to you. If there is nothing else, we're done.
Yeah, I think that just about wraps it up. I don't see any more questions coming through. Brandon has just posted. Can we put those links in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I will quickly do that. So I sent few links about DevOps Labs. Then, as I mentioned, this. So these 4 links I've shared, and basically you will get each and every information, all other links which I have shared in these links. Yeah. Any other question? Anything? Very fine. If there is nothing else, thanks a lot for your time, and thanks a lot for these questions. Emma, over to you.
Thank you so much, Devendra, for today's session. And thank you to everyone who's attended and for all of your questions and comments throughout. And we hope to see you at the next Reactor session.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.